Hello everyone, welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel here on Patreon. I'm John, I'm your host, you're not. Ah man, sometimes I just have to say that. I remember when I first started figuring out, almost 30 years ago, what's going on in this world. And I discovered there were conspiracies going on. You know, people doing things, using their power. And you know, at first, I thought it was just secular. And then I found out shortly thereafter that it's not, it's spiritual. All right, so welcome back. You know, this isn't going to be a religious broadcast, by the way. I just wanted to start with, you know, this is what's going on right now in the world. It's not just about powerful people fighting for control of all the resources. This really is good versus evil. You know, Trump mentions God in his speeches, right? It's symbolic. You know, he's mentioning God. God is good. God, good, gut, right? It's all the same thing. The Dow on Friday closed 666 points down. You know, so you think that that doesn't have something to do with everything? You know, it seems silly, seems conspiratorial, but there really are no coincidences. So, what people would say is, John, that idea you just said that the bankers are evil, so they brought about the number to combat Trump's reference to God in his speeches. Well, that's just a fantasy of yours. That's not real. Read the documents of these evil pricks and what they think and what they believe and what they're trying to do, and you tell me they're not overtly evil. You know, it's not a fantasy of mine. But speaking of fantasies, let's talk about shit hitting the fan. That's right. Today we're going to talk shit hitting the fan. It's not a fantasy. A lot of people have told me that over the years, for the last 30 years. Ah, you're making shit up. It's just a fantasy. You know, that can happen, that these bad things are happening. You know, most think it is a fantasy. That's why only 5% of Americans are preppers. Because everyone else thinks it's not possible, can't happen, it's just a fantasy. Or it won't happen here. It can only happen to people other places. You know, one of the things that we're going to have to do, because everyone else looks at shit hitting the fan as a fantasy, we must be ready 100% before trouble hits. Or you're going to have to compete and barter and battle for what is still needed. Right? When you do that, your risk to injury and theft goes way, way up. And the further we get into some sort of emergency, the more your odds of being successful go down. You know, a lot of people go, you know, before the market collapses, not good or evil here, but before the stock market collapses, I'm going to take my stuff out. I'm going to get out of the market and I'm going to make big bucks. I'm going to be king stud investor. And everyone lost their ass because no one really knows when it's going to happen. They all think they're going to cut a fat hog and stay in there as long as possible and make the maximum amount of money. That's a fantasy. And how do we know that? Because people that are in the stock market to make money, big money, are typically greedy. And that greed outweighs their intelligence. It does. It outweighs their intelligence. You know, if that was just the way it worked, everyone would be doing the same thing. But then again, if everyone got out early, we would just have the stock market collapse that much earlier. Because it really is about the people with power getting out first. Right? Musical chairs. But no one gets ready ahead of time. They all think they've got enough clues. Well, what happened last week? Starting, Thursday. Market started going down. Mini collapse Friday. pretty good sized chunk left the market on Monday. And it's been kind of bouncing back a little bit, and today was flat. But, you know, what happened was the market went down and people got injured. They lost, right? Money was stolen from them, basically. Theft. That's what's going to happen when shit hits the fan. People are going to think that they're going to get out of life early enough and into prepping fast enough that they'll avoid all the trouble. Well, just like the stock market gamblers, they're going to get injury and theft. In a lot of cases, you're not going to get what you want. Right? So as a prepper, shit hits the fan, you go out and try and get your stuff. It's not going to be available. It's just not going to be there. You know? It's just not. So we need to avoid that, because everyone else is going to be operating on the fantasy up to the last second, and they will panic. You know, when shit hits the fan, people are going to need to be, they're going to need to be avoided, I think is the best way to put it. Just avoiding them, because non-prepper people, right, who lives, right now they live in fantasy land. That's where they lived, and then they get the shit hits the fan, and they are scared. They're full of fear. They're unpredictable. You need to be ready ahead of time. The most ahead of time you can get. And I've been watching today. I watched the stock market. I watched how people, they've got their hopes pinned on something that just isn't. They're thinking, no, it can come back, it can come back. Everything's just fine. And they're trying, they're hanging on to that fantasy that everything's just fine and it was some sort of little blip. When shit hits the fan out here, people will be hanging on that stuff, right? They're going to be hanging on to that hope that everything will be fine. And they're also going to be scared to death, right? That's what the VIX in the stock market is, the volatility index. That's a fear meter. 1 week ago, the fear meter was at lowest ever. Within 3 or 4 trading days, it was highest ever levels. Right? So, the reason we want to stay away from non-preppers is because they're full of fear and they're unpredictable. Unpredictable. A few videos ago, I talked about how to deal with these people. Some way to get yourself out of trouble with them if you run into them. But the fact is that they're very unpredictable. And you don't want to be exposed to them because of injury, theft, right? You don't want to be a casualty of shit hitting the fan. You know, certainly not right away at the beginning, right? So what do we need in shit hits the fan? Well, it's basically the same thing that we need in war, right? You need to actually conserve energy. Right? Yeah, you're going to need to fight here and there. That's how it goes, right? You go out on a mission. You deal with it. You come back. You get R&R, rest and recovery, rest and recuperation. But you actually, at all times, whenever you're not being engaged, you need to conserve your energy. You need food. You need rest. You need psychological recovery. Right? So that is something we need to think about before we get the shit hits the fan. Once again, being prepared versus reacting to everything, right? Having a plan so that you can see the predictable and even some of the unpredictable behavior people are going to show. But if you're busy running around trying to gather preps, engaging other people, trying to get news and other things, you're going to raise the odds of becoming a casualty. And I don't mean death by that. I mean suffering an injury or raising the level of threat that you need to face. You need to avoid that, right? If raising the level of being threatened was a good thing, there would be no call ever for the element of surprise, right? There would be no need to have recon. You would just charge in all the time as loud as possible, letting everyone know you're coming. No, that's not how it works, right? You need to conserve your energy. Minimize the amount of exposure you have. Right? When shit hits the fan, trying to do too much, that exposes one to threats. It exposes one to exhaustion. It exposes one to mistakes. And you know, that's when you get in trouble. You're tired, you're overexposed, you make mistakes. That's when you get hurt. That's when other people get hurt and possibly die. You understand that, and you build your strategy around the idea of minimizing exposure, conserving energy. You start to see why being a prepper works, why having food ahead of time works. Sure, anyone can go get water and stuff afterwards, but you want to minimize the need for that. Right? Minimize the health risks. You don't want to do trial by error. You want to practice ahead of time. Right? Now, one of the things is, if we're dealing with reality as preppers, when shit hits the fan, right? Because for now, it's a fantasy that we can talk about, but we see it coming, so it's not really a fantasy. But when it does come, we're going to be in the reality with a plan ahead of time, right? We've got our plan. But everyone else who shows up late, they don't know what is going on. Their reality is everyday life, law and order, lights, water, fuel, food, whatever it is they have. They're now dealing with what they would consider an unreality. See, they're not used to thinking from that position, certainly not operating as a prepper or a post-SHTF player, actor, participant, whatever you want to call them. So because of that, they're not going to realize the consequences of their aggression and their mistakes. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, there's consequences. If you, let's say you're a white guy like me, and you drive down the wrong street in St. Louis, right? There's consequences for that mistake. It's seemingly small because I'm used to driving around in a neighborhood where who gives a shit? But in other parts of the country, there's neighborhoods that do give a shit. For me, I thought it was reality. For them, they're like, dude, you made a mistake, right? So their reality is the one that gets put on me. I'm in their neighborhood. When shit hits the fan, that's our neighborhood. We're ready for that as best as we can, right? So non-preppers, they're going to be foisted into an unreality. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to be scared. In some cases, they'll get aggressive. And they don't understand the consequences of what they're doing. In some cases, they're going to get into a situation where they start a fight and don't realize that the other guys have guns. In other cases, non-preppers, people who are dealing with unreality, they're going to think it's the Wild West instantly, and they're going to start pulling their gun on everyone else. Right? Casualties, injuries, deaths, stuff we want to avoid. I referred to that young fella who decided he was going to fight me in a bar. He was backed by all his buddies, and he didn't really think about the consequences of what was going to happen if he were to actually get into a fight with me. So I slowed the situation down, and I explained those consequences. Basically of me mopping the floor up with him, and then him going to the hospital, and then eventually going to jail because he's the aggressor. Once I explained to him the consequences, he changed his mind about deciding whether or not he wanted to fight me. Now, when shit hits the fan and people are scared, right? When they're reacting, when they're emotional, when they're psychologically traumatized and weak, they're not going to have a nice, polite guy like me to explain it to them. Right? It takes too much time. Think about it. How many weeks, months, and years have you put into thinking about what if that happens? What if there's an apocalypse? What if we go to war? What if there's a nuke? What if the lights go out? What if there's economic collapse? What if? And that's the prepper thing. You start thinking about that. You think about the consequences of that happening. Like I said, fear causes people to make mistakes. Now, a lot of people, as we've talked about, they are so used to not thinking for themselves, being told what to do, conditioned that this is the only reality that's possible. There are multiple realities. There's Captain Caveman, there's Disneyland, and everything in between. Right now, we're dealing with the regular reality. When shit hits the fan, it's a modified reality. A little closer to just nature's law, you know, king of the jungle type stuff. But many right now, most of them, they rely solely on government. Literally, they rely on government to give them rules to follow, to tell them what they can and can't do. They don't realize that when shit hits the fan, we're going to have to rely on our morality, what we know to be right, what is good, in other words. Right? Government assists and makes decisions for people. And it assumes that people can't make good decisions for themselves. Right? Government tells you what's right and wrong. Well, you know, I can take that guy's money in court and sue the shit out of him because of blah, blah, blah. Well, the government told him he can. Court precedent makes it so, but it's not the right thing to do and it's not good. But people do it because government says so. When shit hits the fan, people aren't going to have the government to tell them what to do. There's no set of rules, right? I get emails from Senator Dianne Feinstein advising me about being prepared for an emergency. I think I've gotten 2 of those. But most people, if they even get them, throw them away. Why I get them as a Republican, I don't know. And she sends me some stupid shit, I gotta tell you. Right. But people out there, if they could make good decisions for themselves, if they could look at the world, the reality they have now, today, and look around and make really good decisions, they would be preppers. They would be a lot more than they are today. Today, people are worried about what? Popular culture, tripe, insignificant social questions. They blow off the significant social questions, the significant legal questions. They're worried about what freebies they're going to get, not what have they earned. People, in general, for the most part, are lazy. When shit hits the fan, what is their track record for making good decisions for themselves? Not really good, is it? It's not a lot of experience there. You know, when you are put in a situation where good decisions, bad decision, they have consequences, you deal with it, you learn by experience, you learn from other people, that's going to come miles when shit hits the fan. It's going to help you deal with people and understand them. It's going to help you control yourself. Right? So, you know, being prepared 100% ahead of time when shit hits the fan is going to be, you know, it's just going to help you in a way that you're not going to value until you get there. When you're prepared 100% for a given situation, it means the minimum of exposure to people who are following the fantasy rules, because you're not going to be out there with them. You're not going to be engaging them in unreality and decisions about unreality. You know, they're going to do what? They're going to hearken to what? Now, I use movie analogies or literary analogies. I use those to illustrate a point. But I'm not going to get into shit hits the fan and go, well, I remember in this one movie where the guy hid in the bushes and he jumped out and he stabbed the guy and took his food, happy ending. That's not how it works when shit hits the fan. Now, you can't go into that sort of situation with no understanding of what it is you're facing. For example, in the movies, every time there's a major event, the government shows up with vans and trucks and tents and blankets and food and water. In reality, that doesn't happen. In reality, you show up at the government site, and let's use Hurricane Katrina. They put you in the Superdome. They don't give you food, water, or medical attention. And people in the government site end up getting hurt, up to and including murder and rape. Not to mention robbery and other forms of abuse. Right? That's the reality. When shit hits the fan, you're going to be dealing with a raw reality. So once again, let's go to the movies. What happens in the movies? Well, you know, there's problem. So you grab a fishing pole, you go down to the creek, you catch fish. It's like camping. Time-lapse photography, 1 month goes by, everything's fine. No, in reality, you and everyone else is going to the river to catch fish. All the fish are caught in one day. What do you eat on day 2? It's not going to happen. You go down to the river, someone bops you over the head, takes your fishing pole, and everything you have of value on you, including your clothes, and you're left for dead. That's the real reality when you make mistakes and shit hits the fan. It's going to happen. Right? Now, let's talk about people who are criminals. They're already dealing with the negative, the bad side of a shit hits the fan type environment because they're already living without law. They're criminals. So when we get to shit hitting the fan and it's a without rule of law situation, they've been practicing that for a long time as criminals. They've already been practicing knocking people over the head and taking their shit. They've already been practicing stalking people and following them home, casing the place, and then robbing them blind. It's a different story when you're a prepper, right? You know, hey, this guy's been following me. I took 2 turns, walked in a circle around the block, and that guy's still behind me. I need to do something about it. What your plan is, you need to know, and you need to have ahead of time. It's going to depend on who's in your group, the level of shit hits the fan that you think you're in, whether or not you're armed, whether or not he's armed, there's more than one of them, etc., right? Situation dictates the response. You should understand a variety of different responses. And I imagine that when that happens, or if it happens, you would be all over it up here, right? Giving yourself the most time and the most opportunity to avoid conflict. Once again, right, you can't win if you're dead. And you can't afford to make mistakes. The more mistakes you're exposed to, or the more situations you're exposed to, the greater your risk of casualty, injury, loss. The more mistakes you make while being exposed more often, right, is going to guarantee you much more higher chance. So it's best to be fully prepared. It is. It's best to avoid interaction. It's best to minimize yourself and stay within reality and avoid those who are not. And I have to say this, right? Is shit hits the fan? Is it going to be merely about good and evil? Or are there going to be shades of gray in between? By shades of gray, meaning there's going to be necessarily times when you do things that aren't going to feel good, but you have no alternative, and that is defending yourself. You know, I wish Armageddon was just about having enough food and water to get by. But it doesn't. It also has to do with, right, self-defense. You're going to have to defend yourself to greater and lesser degrees depending on where you are, the experience, size of your group, level of shit hitting the fan, all those things. But you need to have some understanding of reality. Right? I guess one of the things I haven't ever talked about is in your group, in your family, you need to have somebody. Somebody needs to be a counselor. Somebody needs to have an understanding. Because there's going to be a lot of trauma, a lot of psychological trauma, a lot of fear. People are going to need to get over that. When bad things happen, you're going to have to deal with it and then be able to move on and continue. You know, you can't just sit there and drool on yourself and be traumatized. You know, and I know there's not enough psychologists to go around. Right? I think that's why having let's just say having someone who's a combat veteran would be ideal so they can talk about it. Someone who does have some counseling experience or some business experience dealing with trauma. But, you know, maybe not all of us are going to be fortunate enough to have that. You know, it's going to be a crazy world. It is going to be about good and evil because the battle between good and evil is what is taking us to shit hits the fan. And that's happening on the macro level. Right now it's focused in D.C. I said that that first FISA memo that came out, that Nunes is being lampooned over and attacked, that was just the beginning. There's more of that coming. This battle over world domination and control that is going to cause shit to hit the fan. It's not just an accident. It's not just people misbehaving. It really comes down to good and evil. Right? And that's on the macro, the giant big scale. Down on the little scale, that concept is going to continue. You know, it's going to carry down. There's going to be good people and bad people. And that's going to have to continue to fight itself out on the little level, right? In your world, that 10-mile square area around you. Unfortunately, good isn't always going to win. There's going to be good people that are hurt by bad people. Once again, be prepared, 100% if you can, ahead of time, to minimize interaction with the fear-based, unpredictable people who are scared and living in fantasy land. We want to avoid those guys. You know, there's so much to being a prepper. I wish I could just say it's just about food and water and you're covered. But anyways, I like these talks, I like these discussions, and I thought about it all day as I watched what's going on in the world, and I often do. But what to talk to you guys about on a daily basis, you know, what's the priority? This one was the priority today. SHTF, you know, shit hitting the fan is not a fantasy. When it happens, and we started to see people get really freaking itchy on Monday, they can all feel it. And then the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the dark pool, dark money, was brought out, and they've been trying to bring everything back up and calm everyone down. It's cool, it's cool. Reality is this. Reality is the government can go in debt over $1 trillion a year. And if you keep spending enough money, maybe things will get better. If that worked, don't you think things would be a lot rosier? If going into debt worked, the world would be a good place, right? Right? That's the fact. Those people that think that pumping all this money into Wall Street and participating is going to help them, you know, when the market collapses, how's everyone going to feel? Because in a way, everyone that's invested in Wall Street is invested in this fantasy system. It's like being on a boat at sea, right? And everyone's in the boat and you can't get out. They're all trapped in there together. You know, you've got all your money, all your eggs in one basket, and you can't take them out. And when the thief comes along and steals the basket, everyone stands around. Everyone sitting in the boat looks at each other and goes, "What now? They took all of our shit." Right? And then they come home at the end of the day and it shit hits the fan on their personal level, 10 square miles. And they go, "Hey, everyone took our shit. Where's the lights, electricity, gas, food, water? Where's the law?" Right? It's all gone. Now, that is reality. That's a scary place. I'm glad I'm a prepper. I want to thank you guys for coming to Patreon and supporting my efforts here. It's a lot more peaceful. I like that. Right? You guys be cool. Semper Fi, huh? Look around at what's going on. Understand reality. You know, I like Disneyland myself. I do. I like Disneyland. But it's not real. And eventually, reality sets in, you go home, and you have to go to work. So you guys go to work, be good preppers, be good people. I'll talk to you later. Chance favors the prepared mind, right, is yours.